Okay, so have we solved the problems of the world yet around affirmative action?
No.
Okay, because I was thinking, I said, where do we land? We got to land on this. We have to get somewhere on this piece. And I think what we've agreed on is potentially income. I also think we've agreed that race should not be thrown out in the mix at all.
No.
But you know what was said by a professor at Harvard Law School once, which is the question of the new day dawning. As people in the minority races move out of the bottom 25%, they will no longer be getting any kind of quote-unquote affirmative action.
Yeah, you know, it's funny because I'm a bit conflicted on that conversation. I am a part of and understand the African-American middle and upper class, right? So I've recognized them. We have a very large African-American middle class here in the city of Chicago. And yet, when you look at cities like Chicago, New York, Detroit, St. Louis, the hood, if you will, looks the same everywhere you go.
There.
It's brown and black, basically.
Yeah.
And so until those conditions change, to me, that really says that we've come somewhere, not necessarily because we have a small percentage that's doing well, which, to the point, I'm happy that they are, but it doesn't necessarily change the conditions for the masses.
Try rural poverty sometime, white and black.
Absolutely.
And you look at it and you say, those kids don't have any chance. I mean, they still got one-room schoolhouses in part of Appalachia.
Sure,
I recall, and mind you, this was 30 or 40 years ago, but when I worked with migrant workers in law school, going to the camps, and some of them were converted chicken coops.
Yeah.
And it's like, then people moved into places that barely had electricity. It's like, you know, how could they survive, much less have the kids go and be able to go to school and break the cycle?
With all of that, let me ask you a question. What do you think would be the correlation between ethnicity and poverty in America? Do you think there will be a positive correlation between ethnicity in terms of blacks and poverty,
And
or neutral?
First
and Hispanics.
First generation Hispanics, yes. heavily
So now the reason I ask that is that eventually you will find that any affirmative action that's designed around ethnicity actually in more than 80% of the instances would also be dealing with poverty.
Yes.
And I think and you talk about solutions in terms of bringing up, you know, the 25%. You know, one of the things that I've noticed, and I'm not saying it's a complete, you know, generalization, but when you have poverty and when you have, you know, minorities in these impoverished situations, what do you have? You have poor schools, poor education, no jobs in those neighborhoods. So what we can do, I think maybe that can be a long-term solution to affirmative action, is if we finally improve the school systems within these awful neighborhoods.
You're speaking my language, sir.
How about
Right,
preschool?
right.
That's
But
the main-
improve grammar schools, high schools, and then get jobs within those neighborhoods. Now we lift them up,
Sure.
and
And you will
now they
find-
become qualified enough
Mike, I
to
couldn't
go.
agree with you more.
Yeah.
You would find that in almost every advanced economy, and I'm not talking about countries specifically, in almost every advanced economy you would find that educational excellence is at the very top of what has engineered those societies to become where they are, whether it's small little states such as Israel and Singapore, or growing economies like South Korea. And
But I would add to that. I will see you that and raise you one. And I would throw in the mix entrepreneurship into that as well.
Yeah, but you
And-
see, entrepreneurship is not uncorrelated with education. You got to know what you're doing for you to be an investor and a risk taker.
I understand. Yeah, absolutely. And we could have a whole other show around that because we've talked about many entrepreneurs. Many entrepreneurs don't necessarily go off and get PhDs, master's degrees, that sort of thing. They
And
go make business.
education doesn't have to be formal education
Absolutely, I
up to
agree with that.
PhD.
I
You
agree
have
with
to be
that.
well orientated
Sure.
and skilled in what you want to do.
And willing to take
you
a
know,
risk.
And
Yeah,
willing to take
yes,
a risk.
absolutely.
That is
Exactly.
the common
So-
denominator.
Exactly.
So
for all
what I
entrepreneurs,
recognize that exists in our world is probably for all people a level of cultural bias. Let's just be honest. People tend to employ people that they're comfortable with.
Yes.
And that, you can call it racism, you can call it cultural bias, you can call it whatever you want to. Until we change the conditions of who is employing folks, and that's where entrepreneurship comes in, we're having this conversation because at the end of the day, I'm not as interested in getting a job. I'm interested in changing the conditions of employment in these communities. And when we do that, affirmative action becomes less necessary and less relevant to how we change the folks' conditions.
Yeah.
Do you agree with Sandra Day O'Connor's comment? It should be gone in 25 years.
And I'm gonna, we have to end the show. So I'm going to stop. And I'm not going to answer that question. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful,
See, when a
wonderful
woman
day.
talks about another woman, he stops.
Thank you. Perfect. See? Come back next week to find out the answer to that one.